business and to try to get a sense of just a little bit of the flavor of what the Torah says on these issues. Of course, anytime you have a question in how to behave as a Jew, there's going to be a lot of variables. So what I found in researching here is that it's not, you want to talk about business, it's not going to be strictly business law, because there's always going to be other laws as well that are going to be related. So I found something interesting, like some of the laws of how to deal with competition in business, they relate to the laws of love your fellow as yourself, right? Because even though you have a competitor, right, doesn't mean that they lose their status of someone that you have to treat with respect and dignity, but even love. So it's kind of weird. It's a little bit of a different feeling. Like, no, these are your competitors. These people that you want to fail because their failure equals your success, or at least and then you're told you got to love them. So it's a little bit, startling, I think, from the attitude that we're used to in a business environment, or commonly used to in business environments. I wanted to start off talking about this whole idea of disclosures. This, of course, can be in the form of a business. So you have a used car dealer, and I think there's a stigma of used car dealers. We bought our van, we bought an Odyssey. I bought it with a used car dealer. How so? He's like, just buy the used car, but instead of buying it from a used car dealer, I'll take you with me to the used car auction, and you just buy it straight. Yeah. And I see all the people there are all used car dealers, and it seems like maybe it was just the reputation that they have earned. But it's common, what I found, and this to me was very shocking. It's common, it's standard almost, when a used car dealer buys a car at the auction, to roll back the odometer. Like that's. Oh yeah.
Even with electronic odometer?
Oh, they don't care. So what? It makes it even easier.
There's a tax report now where they tell the mileage at each time the car oil was.
Yep.
So if you look at your report, you should be able
yes.
to.
And how do people do that? Like, the people that they sell to them just come in every 2 weeks and give us $200 in cash, and we'll charge you 25% interest. And the second you miss a payment, we have a GPS. On the bottom. Then tomorrow morning you won't have a car, no big deal. And of course we'll have the fees to make up, so you don't have any equity. But is it possible to be a used car dealer and to fulfill the laws of Torah?
No.
I don't know. I was really pondering this question. It should, but will you make any money? But the question is like this: does a used car dealer, let's say he knows the faults of the car? Used cars are not perfect, right? There's going to be leaks, the transmission or whatever, or the axles. Would that be allowed? Like, what must you say? What must you not say? Like, should you have to say everything? Will you ever make a sale?
Yeah, you just keep lowering the price.
Will you make any money? If you actually knew everything that was wrong with the car, it could be a long list. What do you do then? Interesting question, right? Now, the idea of the question or the issue of disclosures is another very common area of life where it's totally different from you. Well, maybe it's not so different, but you have a potential someone that you're dating, right? There's a potential spouse, right? Now, you are taking insulin shots every day, let's say, and you're fine. But you need a shot every day for the rest of your life, right? Let's assume, right? That's common. Do you have to disclose that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have to? Well, what must you disclose? What must not? What should you?
I might get to know them a little bit more before I give them.
But the basis of a successful marriage is communication. Okay, I don't, that even, I think, may trump love, because love is, so, well, I mean, it's not,
commitment
love
is,
and communication are different.
Communication is okay, but commitment is even more important.
Well, of course,
either way, yes.
But communication probably goes hand in hand with commitment, because if you're not communicating, how can you be committed?
I had a lot of experience with this in practice talking to my multiple sclerosis patients who were dating and when to tell them that they had multiple sclerosis. So not the first date necessarily, but after the second or third date, if it's getting a little bit more, you should.
Yeah, but multiple.
Sometime before the wedding night, right?
Well, a long time before the wedding night, unless
Might
it's,
find out the
But
wedding night.
MS is very different than diabetes.
Oh yes, no,
You
it's
know.
different. It's different,
It
absolutely.
impacts you and your spouse probably far more differently than.
Well, less than they used to, but still, yes.
So these are very interesting questions. And
And it's
now the question is
questionable,
also,
you know,
like, what if it's not something like, God forbid, someone has MS, which is a degenerative disease, right? You get worse and worse and worse, right? Insulin is kind of, you can manage it. What if it's a God forbid, a mental disorder where you have
That's a real problem.
but with today's medications, you take your medications and you're fine.
You tell them you're on medication and it's fine. I mean,
You know.
I don't see how you can. I don't see how you can rightfully conceal something like that.
Well, okay.
Well, what if about the family history of, say, heart disease and cancer? You're going to have children with that person, right?
It
And
just goes. It's so
can-
natural. I mean, I
So,
told Barbara
obviously
my
you-
father had a heart attack
Yeah.
in 1980 when he was.
You know,
in
if
his
you're talking
50s,
about
you
some
know.
genetic disease that, something like Huntington's disease in the family, Huntington's chorea, where half the kids get it and they get demented and they later in life, and they came over on the Mayflower, Huntington.
So the question is can we say, are there different categories of problems that you would be mandated to disclose versus other things that are kind of, that may kind of scare a potential spouse, but it's not really justified. So for example, I found these questions. If someone has a fear of flying, right? So they're like John Madden, they need to take their trip. They want to go to New York, they got to take a van,
Yeah,
right?
right, yeah.
So
Monday nights, goes for one.
so that's an inconvenience in life, right? Do you have to tell your potential spouse of every potential
I don't see
inconvenience
how-
that could happen?
I don't see
And
how
usually
you
it'll
can
come out.
tell
Well, it's like this.
Yeah.
Are you going to travel as husband and wife?
It's going to be pretty hard to hide.
Well, okay, but
That's
think about it
ridiculous.
this way. In certain circles, right, in the more religious circles, the dating is merely a means to an end, right?
The dating thing is it's a different.
Oh yeah, so
factor
it's
all
like
to itself.
we're going to take a couple of dates. Depends how many. Is it 5 dates? Is it 10 dates? Is it 20 dates? But it's a fixed amount. It's not forever, and then we'll decide maybe, to get married. It's dating with intention of determining eligibility of this as a potential spouse. So then it gets a little bit more dicey because it's not like you're spending years and years with a person. Whenever you kind of get to know them, you're kind of hybridly married just without, without benefits, or you're just filing taxes jointly, but or separately. But you're basically kind of living together. You got to get to know that person really well. But if you're just dating as a means to find out if this person is appropriate for you, you're not going to find out if they have a fear of flying, or if they are taking insulin shots, or if they're if every morning they're taking medication for
Why not?
imbalances.
Why wouldn't you find?
Well,
what do you talk
the question
about
is
on a date?
what must you say? Now also, what?
Don't,
Well,
among other things, you're discussing your future. You say, I want to do this. I want to do that. How could you not? It's got to be pretty superficial communication. If you don't.
yeah, well,
discuss
yes,
it.
and the question is,
Absolutely.
I think it's more than that. Of course, there's communication about future, but I think that
How are
also
you?
the question is, what must you disclose, or what must and what can you kind of say? This is not something that it's interesting because sometimes you don't want to torpedo a relationship that could be fine for something that would just scare someone off,
Now you just
So,
walk
for
in with a
example,
list. Of all the things in the beginning. This is it.
Remember the Joy
Well,
Luck
if it
Club?
changes, if the list
yeah,
changes,
that's
I mean, hey, I think this is called TMI, that's such information.
so some examples here. It's possible for someone to get unfairly discriminated against. How so? Someone has a sibling that got cancer. Now, I don't know the statistics, but I'm pretty sure that's not something that's necessarily hereditary. It's not something, it's just chance. So if the person has a sibling, but that can freak someone out. Though your sibling had leukemia, or it could be kind of a little bit. It's a little scary, for someone. And of course, it's not rational. But the question is, something like that, would you have to disclose? Some other interesting questions.
What if you can't have kids? Should you disclose that?
Well, I think that you would definitely need to disclose because.
Well, I don't know. We seem to
Especially
be
in
trying to
Judaism,
pick and choose here.
But I'm saying, even in the greater society, like that to me, that's something to know that you can't have children with someone. I think that's something that you certainly would want to know.
Yeah.
Now, there have been stories, by the way. This is important because there have been stories. I'm familiar with stories where there were certain, like, real issues that weren't disclosed, and they were, deal breakers. Mm-hmm. And then, like, if you see, I've seen this before, they get married, and then, like, a week later they're divorced. What happened, right? Can't have been that bad, right? So that's more like an annulment, because if you discover something about the person that is a total no-go, then that's a mistake, and everyone suffers then because, now they had to go through all that and should have been avoided and could have been avoided. Some other interesting questions here. Age discrimination. So you want to work, you want to apply for a job in a certain company or business, and if you're kind of old, they can invest so much in you. I don't know. So that's the point is that it's not fixed. It's not fixed. But the point is, can you kind of would you be allowed to kind of dye your hair?
Of course.
Well, but you're deliberately deceiving. Means your only intention is to deceive the company, the interviewers, that they should think that you're younger, and they should want to hire you more.
That's ridiculous. You have to disclose
Huh?
Men are getting more plastic surgery for that reason.
Because they want to look young.
Oh my God!
I mean,
Well,
for jobs.
you can't recognize anybody on television.
No, but I mean, so that they're employable, so they can compete in the market.
They all look
I don't
alike.
think there's a thing
They all have the
I know, I'm
puffy
just
cheeks.
saying.
Or that,
You can do it on
Another-
the other
as
end.
well, yes.
You can fib if you're too young and make yourself older.
It's also
It's
sexist,
for different. I mean,
Rabbi.
people, really patriotic
That's
people.
also sexist.
What?
well, but
Because the larger
You just
percentage
said
of
men and
the
women,
larger
but
percentage of women would be the ones altering, not men.
But if
Yeah,
women-
but
if men are doing
that
it
is
now,
true,
it's
Oh
but
my
maybe
God!
less
The
sexist.
men on television. Oh, it's terrible.
no. But what's also interesting is that it's yes, you're right.
I
But the
like
truth
old
is that
fashioned
some
way,
people do
you know?
discriminate, and if they
Yeah, but nobody
discriminate,
wants you on
should people suffer and lose potential employment
You
opportunities
never know.
because of other people's,
No, they shouldn't.
so they should use But the question is like that: like, are you allowed to deceive someone? Is that okay?
It's not really deceiving.
Yeah,
It's
well-
putting yourself forward. There's
Yeah,
a
but-
reason the makeup counters at Macy's are busy, okay?
Yeah, but is
You
your
work
best?
there.
Yes, it is your best self, but your best self kind of
You're
rolls back the
suggesting-
odometer. How is it different than rolling back the odometer? How is that different?
Because we are full of potential.
No, but you want to buy a car, and the car has an expected life value, 250,000 miles. You roll back the odometer. Now it looks like it's better. You're hiring an employee. You're saying this employee, I'm going to have him until 65, and I'm investing in the employee. Now they're rolling back the odometer.
There is a difference.
I don't know. I don't know, man. It's interesting.
If you roll back the odometer, you are changing a fact.
Mm-hmm.
It was 120,000 miles, now it's 20,000 miles. So the fact has changed, which affects how that machine works.
Okay.
If I
But it also
decide-
affects. Okay.
This is not my natural hair color.
No.
Sorry. All right,
See,
but if
I
I
just
decide to
stopped
dye my
believing
hair,
in gold.
if I became unemployed and I decided to dye my hair, I decided to have a little facelift, because I don't want to be perceived as incompetent because I'm over 50. It's not that my competence has changed, it's not that I'm a different person, it's that I don't want you to think.
Yeah, but the car as well. The
I-
car
wait a
drives
minute.
fine.
Because you're
This car drives great.
It's all
I don't
You
know
were
what
changing
it
the
shouldn't.
function, you were changing the function.
I agree, that there is I mean, first of all, a car odometer is against the law, okay? Getting a facelift.
Some
is
cars,
not
they
against
last
the law.
forever.
Getting a facelift is not illegal.
That's fair.
Okay.
Yes, so of course, all this has to be with an understanding that it has to be fit into the law of the land. You can't say that I'm going to do something illegal because right. So this is, of course,
Not only that, but
within that
actually
framework.
Societal norms.
But I think it's a legitimate comparison, or at least initially, that like some cars, they die after 100,000 miles, but some cars make it to 250 or even 300.
But the
You know, but-
odds are, if it's a Mazda and the engine's good and they usually go to 300,000, that's fine. But if it's like
Yeah.
a little Toyota or something that's
There are
Hyundai that's not going to make 300.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Take insurance, okay, which is indirectly part of my industry. You cannot say I have, and our physicians here will certainly attest to this. If you've got, if you've had a heart attack, you can't apply for insurance and say you've never had a heart attack. They ask you that. That is
And they can
fraud.
investigate. You have to
Okay.
sign your life away. They can They can look it up. The record.
Right.
Yeah, but
And
but-
if the death comes,
Yeah,
and they
but
find there
so
was
2 years.
so that
mistake.
demonstrates
Yeah.
that the actuaries that have figured out the likelihood of someone dying, right? And can you lie about your age? Also not. Why not? Right? Because that is going against what the
You'll
interest
get
of the other
caught.
party. Of course, but it's also deception, right? Like they are insuring you at a certain bracket based on the actuarial tables, and they say like if someone is older, they're more likely to have heart problems and cancer and whatever, and die. Well, an employee, you don't want your employee to die, right? So the older they are, the more likely they are to be, to have health problems. I'm just saying the question is a good question. I'm not trying to take it aside. I'm just. I think
if you're
that
going to spend your life with someone,
Too much
if you're going to make
PC
that
around
kind of
anyway.
commitment, there are a
Political
few
correctness
commitments that are more
along with this. It's different.
significant than that. I don't think you can withhold anything. Like you say, maybe not on the first date, but if it's going to be any kind of meaningful relationship, you have to be open with each other.
yeah.
You cannot really hide anything. Now, if my 3 generations ago I had someone that shoplifted or whatever, whether you need to bring that, I mean, I guess there's some common sense in it. But
Yeah, like my older son's first marriage, his wife's father was in jail for embezzling from the Ohio Police and Fire. He ran there. He was in jail for 5. I never met the guy.
yeah, I mean,
That
there's
kind
some,
of-
but I
we
mean,
did know about it though.
I certainly think any kind of illness.
My son met him.
I certainly think any kind of,
My son met him in
because that
jail.
affects, and if there's true love there, maybe there's going to be a way
But
to
he
work
didn't-
around it. You got to
he
work
didn't
around
send
your
me a
problems
note
if
to-
Yeah.
I was
Pay
gonna
for
say,
the
Robert,
wedding.
there's no
It was the
perfect
first
person.
marriage.
Everybody's got something. When my husband met me, he thought I was a lot younger. Because his
The
first
second
2 wives
one
were like
is
20,
not
and when he found out I was in like my early 30s, he was like, "Oh my gosh, you're like a dinosaur." And he kept saying it, but then like we got married and we've been married for a while. So there's no perfect.
Okay, so let's try to see what the sources say.
I mean, you're disclosing things about yourself. I mean, what if there's something that, could affect from even not only yourself, but like a situation, like his, how far.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like there's some sort of line with the things that you have to in certain situations, and some where it's kind of you could avoid that. So let's see what the sources say. So clearly, the first source talks about a seller. Someone is selling an item. It would be against Torah law for them to not disclose the potential blemishes of whatever is being sold. Not only that, whatever imperfections or promises, imperfections or blemishes that the item has, it would be the seller's responsibility to disclose it. It doesn't mean that the seller has to be honest when the buyer asks and inquires about said product, said item. Rather, it's the seller's responsibility to upfront to make that disclosure. We have, like, for example, you sell a house, there's a mandatory seller's disclosure. And that's because people otherwise wouldn't do it. So you buy a house and suddenly, everything's broken and the air conditioners aren't working and the plumbing has problems. Right? That's a problem because people aren't following this law. But by Torah law, you'll be mandated to do that. Now, thankfully, in America, you're mandated to do that as well by common law as well.
So wouldn't the Torah thus say that the auctioneer who alters the odometer and then tries to sell it has to say, I push back this odometer before he sells it?
He would have to do that. He would have to say that, which would, I think...
Might nullify
What would the
the
purpose?
Yeah, what the
Why
purpose be?
bother?
Yeah.
Now, what if my disclosure of the product I'm trying to sell would lower the value of the product? Still got to do it, right?
It's the right thing to do.
Now, there's an interesting kind of gray area where the disclosure is scary, but it doesn't affect the value of the item. So, for example, in real estate, do you have to disclose if someone died or someone was murdered in the house? So I think it depends on the different thing. Now, it doesn't matter if someone was murdered in the house. It has no bearing on the house.
No bearing.
And that would just, but it just kind of gives people the goosebumps,
He did it in The Shining, if you remember. Told Jack Nicholson.
No, but it happened 10 years ago. There's no problem with purity loss, right? So someone was shot and killed tragically in the house, right? Does that affect really the value of the function of the house? Certainly not.
It does. It
Depends
does.
whether
It does. If
how
people
much you
know
will-
about
you
it.
will-
Also, if you don't know about it, you don't know about it. It doesn't bother you if you don't know about it. But if someone says, over here in the kitchen, right? Someone came in with a knife. Like every time you're in the kitchen, you're thinking about that, right? And that's harmful. So do you have to disclose that? So it's information that doesn't at all really affect the value of the function of the product if you don't know about it. It's not like the plumbing or the air conditioning or whatever or the foundation. But it's just, it'll give people the creeps and it'll lower what they're willing to pay for
It's
it.
a little more interesting question, I think.
So there's an
Or more-
interesting Talmud about this.
Nobody tells you, and then your neighbor says, "Oh, wait to meet you. Here's a cake. No, welcome to the neighborhood." Like they used to do that. And
You
says,
bought the ghost house or something. Yeah.
You wouldn't believe it, but not too
bought the
long
death
ago,
house.
the house went on sale after there was a blankety blank.
Yeah, but then
So there's chalk outline on the floor, right?
it's
But legally...
that's not that's
So
it's
is
ready.
that an element? Can that be
No,
like
that
legal?
wouldn't that wouldn't necessarily because it's not. I'm saying it's the question is does the seller have to
Oh, sorry.
So the Talmud says something very interesting. The Talmud says that what happens. So if you have a non-Jewish father and a Jewish mother. So according to everyone in Halacha, child is 1,000% Jewish. No questions whatsoever. There's no debate. But there's a stigma. The Talmud says that even in times of the Talmud, people say, well, your dad's not Jewish. Maybe that would be a stigma in certain communities. So the Talmud says a very interesting story about one of the rabbis. And he has a student. The student's 100, 1,000, 1,000,000% Jewish. But his dad's not Jewish, and he's having a hard time acclimating to the community. So he tells him, move out of town, go someplace else, don't tell anyone about it, change your name to Cohn or Goldman, and just move on with your life. That's the advice that the rabbi gives. Now, clearly, this is once again information that is doesn't actually affect anything about the person. The person's 100% Jewish, and he is, by his own merits, he's his own person. But it's something that would, it would needlessly cause him or cause others to cast him in a certain light and have some sort of stigma that he'd have to live with. And clearly he could see that he could run away, go to some other city, and not tell anyone about it, and he does not need to disclose that. So based upon this Gemara, some of the commentaries say that if someone has, either in business or in personal relationships, if someone has something, information that is not indeed, it won't affect the transaction or the marriage or the relationship, but it would kind of be scary and people would be like a little bit hesitant to to partake in it, they would not need to disclose it. So, an example: if someone had some sort of scary medical procedure, but they're 1,000% fine. Someone had cancer, right, when they were 12. God forbid, right? But they're fine. They went through chemo and they went through this and they went through surgery and they're fine. They're totally clean. Now,
Funny because it reminds me when just before I got married, my wife told me that she had, when she was 10, she had some tumors removed from her leg at Temple University, where I was going to med school. So I went and looked them up from 30-some years ago. They were all benign. Well, I wanted to know what the hell they were. I knew they were benign.
Well, how could you get, because it's you, but it wasn't her, you had authorization, or did you go
As a
around?
medical student, I just went to radiology and requested the film. In those days, we didn't have all this HIPAA crap,
I missed when you said she told you. I thought it was more recent.
No, she told me it was way back.
Information.
right. So the question is, how does this apply to changing your appearance for job? So there's an interesting discussion about this, because according to some, they extend this principle to dyeing your hair, for example, to make you appear a little younger and to avoid
To who? Some Talmud scholars?
some of the postim, which means the halachic authorities that discuss these things at great length. We're doing dipping our toe into these kinds of questions.
That could apply to makeup. You change your face every time you put makeup on.
Right, but does that mean you shouldn't put on makeup? Because
Well, that's
you're not putting on makeup. You're not doing anything
question.
different. If that's who you are, that's who you are. But the point is, can someone who never dyes their hair, but now they're having an interview tomorrow, and they want to look a little bit younger because they know, justifiably or otherwise, that this company is going to discriminate against people that are old, right? Can they do that? So it's not like this is, they brush their hair and they get dressed like a mensch, right? And they put on makeup. That's not the question. That's what they do every day. But the question is, can they say, tomorrow I have an interview, I want to deceive the interviewers to make them think that I'm younger, and because I'm going to be either justifiably or unjustifiably
It's not
think
so
it's
much-
untreated.
It's not
So-
so much a deceit as an attempt to avoid unlawful discrimination.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you're giving the reverse thing, but I agree with you.
What about lying on the
Your
resume?
normal,
right.
but you're not
Yeah.
saying your normal, so they're eventually gonna get your authentic self.
But then it might be too late.
But that's the
Exactly.
point. It's too late to discriminate unlawfully against you after they hire you, and then they
Well, I'm not
fill
a-
out the final
People have
forms
all
and you
kinds
give
of
your
reasons
your.
for firing.
You're
They're not allowed to
Only
ask.
except in the government.
Well, think about it this way. Okay, so but based upon this Gemara, that someone can not disclose something which doesn't affect who they are in a material way, there are those that want to extend that to doing something like that. That they may appear, they try to make themselves appear younger to apply for a job because they don't want unwarranted age discrimination.
It's over.
A question.
Now-
What about the woman who's pregnant? She knows she's pregnant. She applies for a job. I saw this discussion. She's pregnant. She doesn't know. She should tell the employer, but she's not showing. But then, yes, she'll start to show. Does she have to say?
I think that'll be the
she's
same
pregnant?
question. But that does affect. It does
It
that
can
does
affect
affect
the employer with
the-
hiring. If I have the same qualifications as he does, but he's
right.
a
But what's
man
going to
and-
happen in a couple of months? You'll be AWOL for a couple of months, right? So
What
companies.
my skill set that they base. I want.
But that's not what they're hiring. They're hiring you as an employee. So it's
Yeah,
very- and-
they have a
discrimination.
business decision to make unrelated to your personal situation. So if you're
But do
gonna,
you disclose it?
of course you have to disclose
I
it.
don't
If
know.
if they have making a decision which will cost them money, if you cannot stay on, they gotta take all the factors into
But
consideration.
it could be anything like.
It has nothing to do with
But
qualification in that particular.
if they hired him instead of her, well, what if he had an illness in 6 or 8 months?
Well, he should
Who is
disclose
yeah,
it.
that he discloses that. If he does not aware, the question is, what's the responsibility of them to?
Pregnancy is inevitable.
Oh, I have a different thing.
But it can happen with the employee.
Well, okay.
You have to disclose an abortion
Depends on how.
to your, to
Of course
be,
not.
Yeah.
if she had an abortion and the woman's gone out with this guy, they're thinking about getting married, she had an abortion in the past, or she gave up a child in the past, should she have to disclose that? I think she should.
I think that's another.
And
I
I'm
don't
very
think so.
pro-life, but to me, that's a legal thing she did. Unfortunately, it's legal. But but the
Yeah,
point
but
is,
it works up here.
On
It
the other
affects
hand, if
guilt
you-
and all this other crap.
If
I
you're
don't
going
think that
out
should
with a
be a-
woman
I don't
and
think
she
that should
voted
be
for
a
Trump,
disclose.
that she has to disclose. I just keep doing this.
Well, that was
Now, there is a dissenting opinion. So,
between us, you mean?
no, there's a dissenting opinion, and that's why this is an exploration of a topic, and I don't feel qualified to make a decision to arbitrate between people that are much greater Torah scholars than all of us combined. But there is an alternative opinion that says that there are important practical considerations that a company may make when they decide who to hire. For example, there's recruiting and training and other costs that go into having an employee. If you know that this employee has a certain shelf life, and that would affect your decision whether or not to hire them. So it's not immaterial information, their age. Now, of course, there may be actual laws in the United States about age discrimination, but this is not needless discrimination. That this is really a decision based upon the interests of the company, and thus it may actually matter, and it may indeed involve a certain degree of deception that would not be allowed. There's an interesting question that the Talmud says. The Talmud says, what about if you have a slave? Now, let's put the questions about slavery on the side, okay? Let's table those those questions. We'll talk about it some other time. But maybe when we talk about the Torah portions, talk about slavery. Yeah, hi.
What if there's a woman who's married 2 years, she's planning to have a family,
But she's not pregnant now?
she's not pregnant.
Then it's
And
And
she,
that they're going for a job and there's another.
Oh, that happens all the time now.
well, you cannot affect the prejudices of the other person, right? I don't think so. Oh, you could, maybe big picture, but if they have prejudices, that's fixed. The question is, if something that's not even around now, like we're thinking about maybe having a family, she's not even pregnant now. I would think you certainly don't need to disclose that because there's nothing material now, and they know they see if they see a woman and who's young, who's married.
Okay.
They'll know that there is a chance that she may want to have a
I don't
family.
think you can't ask that question
Well,
as
that's
an
what I was
employer.
about to ask. Now,
You
wait a
can't
minute. Are
say
you
you're
sure
planning
you
to have a
can't?
family
Of course
soon.
not, but
No, wait a minute.
you can affect their prejudices, right?
No,
they're
no.
there and they
It's
see
not
you.
prejudice. It's just
Can't answer that
common sense, which now getting out of date, right?
Yeah.
In modern society, at least in this country. But for instance,
So I think that's certainly, according to all opinions, you would not need to disclose because there's nothing you need to disclose.
Well, wait a minute.
Right.
I don't know. Now, wait a minute. I know we have physicians here. I don't know if we have lawyers, but does
everybody's a lawyer.
What? But you're saying it's illegal for an employer to ask a
That's right.
simple question. What is your? Do you plan about? Why shouldn't they be able?
Now,
to
what else?
Yeah,
that?
if you ask this question, you're so screwed.
I want to take something.
HR will come after you.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, we've got a bunch of lay people saying it's against the law.
40
but I want
years in human
Okay,
resources.
can
It's
I just
against
give
the
you
law.
a factual example? Okay, I work for Chick-fil-A. Most of y'all know that. They asked me when I interviewed with them, what is your feelings on premarital sex? They will ask you the most private questions.
They
and
can't
as
do
far
that.
as
They're not allowed.
Well,
Their
Just laws have
purpose
changed.
of their-
I know that, but I don't know if
Okay,
they're allowed
but
to
there
do
is
that.
a reason. Well, it was 30 years ago, but
They
but
can't
there
do
is
it
a
now.
reason. They have managers that work with 15, 16-year-old girls. They don't want some pervert. They've got an image to protect. Okay, they don't want some, so they have a reason for
So
doing
the only
it.
thing
I
they
think
can
it's
do
a
is
total-
they can
and
check
you
out
don't have
their
to work for
arrest
them if you don't.
history. They can check out their arrest history if they've been arrested, but if they've never been arrested,
But
for
they're also
anything,
trying to get into the character of the person they're about to hire.
they can't
I
use
think
those
that's-
questions. They're not allowed to do that today.
They're
So-
doing it.
You
They
can't
did
even
it.
ask. You can't even. The only way you can find about their health is to say, "Can you have any health issues that will interfere with your ability to do your work?"
Okay, we've got a bunch of
So-
would-be lawyers here.
No, no. I was
Well,
sued.
you have to know that. Yeah, you have to know that.
So if they ask you,
You know,
what's
it
your
doesn't
feeling
directly
towards the
access
sex with 16-year-olds,
I had a
right?
lawsuit.
What exactly are you gonna say? Yes, I love
It
it.
cost me 20 grand.
Or if you want the job, you will say no, I don't like it, right?
So the Talmud says something very clearly.
Outside of my work.
Let's say someone has a slave. Now let's table the questions about slavery and the morality behind slavery. But it was a fact that at the times of the Talmud, 2,000 years ago, slaves was common. People owned slaves and to sell them and buy them. Right? That's a fact. Right? So the Talmud entertains the question: would someone be allowed to dye the hair of the slave that they're selling?
Oh my gosh.
Make the slave seem younger, I guess.
Yes.
Well, that's an
Make it more
extension of
valuable.
Because if
yourself.
they can do it for the job, they can do it for the slave for.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, when you pay people
But
out there and
this is, I think this is almost exactly like
If the
changing the
slave
odometer,
agreed.
right?
But if the slave
Because
agreed,
you're not buying the person's employment, you're buying the person,
yeah.
right? Of course, there's big moral problems with that, of course, right? But if you're buying the person itself, it's like you're buying the car itself, and you're almost exactly dialing back the odometer. So Talmud actually says that that is not permitted. This is why it's interesting that there are those that conclude that in modern times when someone is selling their employment, they would be allowed to dye the hair, but in ancient times when someone was selling their slave, they would not be allowed to.
But what about caveat emptor? Buyer beware.
Right, but the
You can look at the slave and say, hey, he doesn't really look like 25-year-old, more like 70-year-old.
Maybe
Probably,
could
yeah.
be caveat
Yeah,
vendor too.
yeah.
Caveat Venters, 47th Street
Yeah, so probably
Electronics in New
he's
York
70-year-old.
City.
I was not going to send him to that stone quarry, right?
now,
Cynical.
so that's one branch of the discussion concludes that information that's not material and it's kind of in the gray zone, it doesn't really affect the performance of someone in their job, they would not need to disclose it, and that would apply, of course, as well to marriage. Even though marriage, I would say, because it's much more of a commitment, it's probably smart to disclose as much as possible.
Can we talk about money lending and usury laws? Is that all?
We can. We
goes
could.
back
we-
a long time.
Part of this?
What we can do is we could table our plans of doing 54 talks on the Torah and just have 54 talks on this. Very complex laws.
Yes.
Very, very
Dipping
complex.
toes.
Huh?
Dipping toes.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm
For
not.
instance, in Islam, you cannot charge percent. You do something else. You call all this. How's it called? This bonds, Islamic bonds. You comply with. Yeah,
I know
forgot
about
the term,
American
yeah.
bonds. I don't-
But what about in Judaism?
Yes. There are certain prohibitions against charging interest. Now, this applies interestingly only to Jews.
To your fellow.
To your fellow Jews. This is like a community thing. It's not like a principled financial philosophy thing.
You're not allowed
It's
to
okay
charge interest to other Jews.
To other Jews, right?
So how
That's
can
right.
you stay? So you can only stay in business by being outside your community if you're in the.
No, so that's why I said it's
That's what
complicated
caused
because
the pogroms.
there
because
are
they were lending to Christians. And
right because the
come back with us.
Christians were not
Yeah.
allowed to do any form of usury whatsoever, and the Jews would very often be the moneylenders, and they would have very, very, very low interest rates of like 45% annually, which the prevailing numbers of the time were over 200%. Yeah, so this is like payday loans.
But you're saying that
They must have lost a lot of.
Christians were not allowed to be in the.
That's right. Christians weren't doing those kinds of businesses, and Jews were not allowed to own land and have other kinds of businesses. So it was kind of a very good fit. Jews were good with money, good with numbers.
Sukuk.
But they had to have the money to be able to loan it.
A certain amount of it.
They had depositors.
They had to, exactly.
Yeah, but the whole Jewish community would come together.
They loan the
and
money
make
at
a loan.
45% and pay 5% interest. Is that it?
Something like that.
On the other hand, so the Christian could
Now-
was not going to pay the loan, and he'd get away with it.
So there is back to this age discrimination thing. So there is this one branch that says information that's not material. That's just people are going to unfairly judge you. You don't need to disclose that. Alternatively, there's another opinion, another branch in the discussion that's going to say that even if the information that you feel is irrelevant, but would be a cause of concern for the other party in this transaction, be it marriage or business or employment or whatever, you would need to disclose it. Now, what do you do with the Gemara that says, according to this opinion, that says that you do need to disclose it? How do you understand the Gemara that says that the rabbi told his student to travel elsewhere and don't tell anyone about his family history? They say that case would be different because in that case, that was going against the opinion of the rabbi, where the rabbi said, don't discriminate, and they were discriminating nonetheless. Thus, as a way to prevent the people from discriminating against the Torah, he told them to go and not inform the people of his new community of his past history.
Well, instead of educating the community about how you shouldn't
you can educate it, but if people have prejudice, it's very hard to just on a dime to have them
Whole
change it.
Community of Jewish mothers, and you want to educate them.
Now, there is
To change their mind.
questions that were asked in modern times. Someone that has there was a girl who had dermatological disorder that she lost all her hair, and she's wearing a wig. But it's a wig that kind of looks really good and can be confused with real hair. So that everyone seemed to agree that you would need to disclose that. Other examples here. Oh, so now what is included? So there's, like I said, there's a lot of variables that go into this question. For example, we mentioned earlier, there's the question of you have to love your fellows yourself, and that implies, of course, somebody you're doing business with, certainly someone that you're going to entertain, going into a marital relationship with. You have to love them as well, and don't do to them something that you don't want to be done to you. And if you want to know that kind of information about your fellow, about your potential spouse, why would you deny them that information about you? Similarly, you cannot, if you have a lost item that you found of someone else, you have to return it to them. Now, of course, that would not only be limited to lost items, but also lost pieces of information. If this person is trying to access this information, and you have it, and they're looking for that information, there are those that want to compare those two ideas, that there's information that you have that they're looking for, and just like if they're looking for their car keys or whatever, you have to try to help them find it. If they're looking for information, you have to help them find that. And of course, there's a general mitzvah in the Torah not to cause anguish to your fellow, and if there's a way that you could prevent someone else from having anguish and pain, you would be obligated to do it. Of course, there's a general prohibition against lying. Nowhere are we told that you are allowed to lie. So, of course, if this question is addressed straight up, you would want to know. I remember when I was dating my wife, she told me that she has...
Did you disclose everything to her?
I still haven't. But I said I'm not going to disclose anything, but I wouldn't disclose it even after marriage. I guess that's okay, probably, right?
Well, y'all have been married a while, so I guess you did.
So she told me that in course of conversation, that she has allergies. So I don't know, what does that mean? Allergies it can mean anything, right? So it turns out that she has very minor allergies. If there's nuts and seeds or whatever, she gets a little,
runny nose or
something like nothing, right? But some people, I remember I had a friend who married a girl, and she was so deathly allergic to any forms of nuts and seeds and wheat and gluten, whatever, that we were in yeshiva during the break, and we went into the local bakery to get her croissant, and he's like, "Oh, I can't walk into the bakery because if I walk into the bakery, I don't even buy anything or touch anything or anything like that. That, it could just be disastrous." So that's obviously something that I think everyone would agree that she must disclose beforehand. But something that's it's or obvious, when probably in the course of any interactions. But something that's more trivial or something, they get hives in the summer, that's obviously not so material. That would probably, unless it would cause anguish. So you have to kind of find that middle ground.
There is a difference between direct, explicit disclosure and something that may just come up in conversation, like I have hives, versus I am.
Right.
If you give me a croissant, I will die.
Yeah. Or if you go into the bakery, I will die.
That it will be in her interest to let him know like on their first date, right?
Oh yeah, like and this
Yeah.
this I think has become more common. Like allergies be a big deal now because all these schools are nut free and all the kids don't have exposure, right? People like peanut butter sandwiches, and
You want to surprise your
Peanut butter.
your date with a cake with nuts in it? I mean, what that's
or if you
breakfast
like
in the morning.
you have peanut butter sandwiches every morning, and you're gonna get married to someone who's like, if there's a peanut in the neighborhood, I'm dead, right? You know those people, right? Or
It's good insurance.
yeah, or have
They're
tubs
saying
of.
expose the kids to these things early in life. Is
Oh yeah, of course. Or just get like a tub of Benadryl.
Well, Barbara had to find out about my weird eating habits very early on, but I wouldn't have wanted. I mean, our second date, we go on a picnic and she prepares all kinds of fruit and everything, and I hate fruit. And she worked so hard and everything. She said, I worked so hard to get this, and but she married me anyway. So, I mean, but at least I didn't hide that from her.
So, what happens if the disclosures weren't done? So, this is an interesting question. Of course, it's a very broad question. If there were disclosures that should have been done and weren't, is it possible to annul a transaction, annul a marriage? Very, very big discussion. Talmud, for example, says if a man marries a woman, and then they find out that either he or she is incapable of having children, so that's a game changer, a deal breaker. And thus, they wouldn't even need to get divorced. They wouldn't need to get documents of divorce because the marriage was a farce. It was based on mistaken information.
But what if you didn't know that you were sterile? That may not have come out.
And maybe that would be the same thing as well. It's not merely a question of the intentions of the person who has the malady, but rather it's just the intentions of the person who I wouldn't have gotten myself into this. It was based on mistaken principle, mistaken understanding.
But that
So it's not based upon a malicious decision to not inform someone.
Well, what percentage of people find out before they're married
That they're infertile.
that they're men or women that are infertile?
So the Gemara gives a
This day and time, probably a lot of it. At that time,
but the Gemara gives a list of characteristics of infertility that are readily apparent. So
If you have Klinefelter syndrome or something like that. Yeah.
So the Gemara
I've
puts
never seen
like
a case
infertility
anymore.
in different categories.
XXY.
There is infertility that's apparent. So for example, if someone doesn't have puberty, right, they never have puberty. It's called an islandness. The Gemara calls it an islandness. Of course, but there could be infertility that's not aware. This just no one's aware of it, and that of course would be treated, I think, differently.
What does the Talmud say about that? Because I know, like Rachel, it took her a very long time to get pregnant. Sarah had a hard
Yes, there is some sources in the Talmud, very interestingly, that talk about why all the forefathers and matriarchs were infertile, or at least initially infertile. Very interesting Gemara that in Yevamos that says that this was the Almighty's way of saying that we want them to pray and to earn it. Interesting you asked about that because
Anna is the same thing.
Yeah, I thought it.
Usually you asked about that because this past week when I'm doing my research, beefing up my research on Genesis to get ready for our exploration of the Torah, I did encounter that particular Gemara. So interesting you asked about that. There is an opinion, just that once you asked, that even talks about them actually being infertile, like being sterile, and yet the prayer was able to overcome the biological barriers. Very interesting idea. So there's a huge discussion about what happens when there was a transaction based on mistaken principles, mistaken understanding, and does a transaction get invalidated automatically? Do you have to protest? So, for example, what if someone finds out that their spouse has deathly allergic to nuts? So that would be a game changer, a deal breaker for most. But they're like, maybe I can live with it. If there's which is a tacit acceptance of it. By the fact that they're not protesting, according to one opinion, they're not protesting, so that means they accept it. That means that if they want to undo the marriage, it's too late for an annulment because there was this time where they didn't reject it explicitly.
Hey, Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Was the Mishnah that you're reading from, was that something that was in business and then the Gemara's bringing in marriage?
Well, no,
Explanation for it?
yeah, well, it's a general question of what you need to inform others when you're having a transaction.
It's like
So
informed consent.
Right. So the Talmud talks about marriage as a transaction, and it is like it's each side is committing something to the. It's not unlike other monetary business transactions. So they overlap. Of course, there's going to be differences, right? But in fact, the word that is even used in Talmudic sources for marriage is actually a kinyan, which means a transaction. So there has to be knowledge and intent, and right, all the things that apply to any other transaction have to be in place for a marriage as well. Which, by the way, what happens if even divorce, by the way, is a transaction. So the Talmud deals with a problem if some person is incapable of cogent decision making. So someone goes crazy, right? So they would not be a candidate for making transactions because the transaction is based, of course, upon a conveyance of either a product or service or whatever in exchange for compensation. But there has to be the element of understanding, of knowledge, right? You have to have a desire and intention to do that. If someone's not capable of forming those decisions, then they're not capable of doing transactions. So the Talmud talks about, can a child actually own anything? Because to own something, you have to make even if you find something on the floor, right? You're not acquiring it from someone else. You're just acquiring it from no one. It's ownerless, which, by the way, doesn't exist in American law, but exists in Torah law. So, but in order to acquire something, you have to actually lift it and bring it into your domain, but you have to also have intention. And the Talmud is working on the understanding that most children don't have the capacity to formulate those kinds of thoughts. So can a child ever own anything? And even if someone gives them something, so there is the mind of the giver in that half of the transaction, of the gifter even, and then there's the mind of the receptor or the receiver, and they have to have intention. So it's called das, by the way, in Hebrew, which means knowledge or understanding, intention. And thus, these two areas do overlap a lot. And certainly with regards to the disclosure, they are frequently talked about in the same sentence, so to speak.
Rabbi,
Very interesting. Of course, they're very different.
what about that?
Debt. What about debt?
Under what circumstances the creditor can enforce or seek to enforce a judgment against the debtor or some debt forgiveness? What about that?
Yes.
Doesn't that get into the whole usury thing and everything?
No, but even in a case where there is no interest, there's a mitzvah Torah to lend money to your fellow without interest.
No, okay, I lend it.
So there is debt, and now you
want my money back.
want your money back, right? So that person would have to pay it to you, and you'll be able to. You could create liens on their property, for example. So you lend money to someone, and they have a nice house, and that house is a lien. You have a lien on that house because they owed you money. Now they're not doing so well. They have a gambling problem. They sell their house, and they're out of money and the house. You actually have dibs on that house.
Yeah.
Very, very detailed laws. Like,
Yeah. So, is there any material difference between Jewish debtor-creditor relationship laws and modern societies?
of course, there's going to be differences. Yes, I'm saying this entire book's written on
Can you
this.
enslave like?
Now, the only way to enslave
put him in
someone,
a prison or something?
like someone comes and eats in the restaurant and doesn't pay, right? Oh, I left my wallet at home, right? So they make him scrub the, right?
Floor, yeah.
Yeah, scrub the floor.
Make them wash dishes.
Wash dishes, right? Now, what would happen if someone goes into the restaurant in Jewish law, or someone borrows money and doesn't have the ability to pay? So, and there doesn't have any assets that the creditor can take from. So what happens then? So that actually, interestingly, there is a law that says someone can enslave themselves, which is not real enslavement, the way we understand it, because it just means that they're contracting themselves out, but they're not actually
Indentured
owned.
servitude.
Indentured servant.
Like in India now.
To someone to pay their debts. The only time that would be foisted upon someone, the only time that would be mandated by the court is if someone steals. So if someone steals, actually commits theft from another person, and now doesn't have the ability to pay, then and doesn't have any assets to sell or anything like that, the court would actually intervene, sell the guy as an indentured servant to pay the debts. But if the question is, I guess, if someone eats at the restaurant and doesn't pay, is that stealing? Maybe that's a good question. But if someone just has a debt and is doing poorly, and their business is tanking, and they borrowed money and they don't have the ability to pay, no, they would not be allowed. They would be forced into slavery or indentured servitude to pay their debts.
So they would or would not?
They would not.
So basically, you need to write off the debt.
No, you have the debt, and you hope the person will get back on their feet, and they'll be able to pay you back.
Do they have bankruptcy laws?
Well, there's the Shemitah and the Shemitah law. The Shemitah is every 7 years. At the end of the Shemitah, there is a verse in the Torah that says all debts get annulled.
Is it where the 7 years thing when your credit history comes?
Yeah, maybe that's where it comes from. Yeah, bankruptcies don't stay on your credit report for 7 years. Very interesting.
Years, it's too much of a pain.
That is so interesting. Yes.
Let me ask you a question. If were people going out and borrowing, people denying lending people money, of course, I would assume, like you get close to.
So that's the thing. This is the famous cripple. I might have mentioned it a few times here. I don't know if we talked about it or not. The problem is that next to that verse that says that we have an annulment of loans at the end of the 7 years, we have a verse that says, well, 7 years is coming at the end, right? It's going to be the end of the 7th year, and suddenly someone comes to borrow money from you. And there's a mitzvah in the Torah that says, do not withhold lending the guy money just because it may get annulled. Now, of course, if we actually believed in God, if we had perfect faith, 1,000%, that wouldn't be a problem for us. The problem is, even 2,000 years ago, they didn't have perfect faith. And people would withhold lending because, who would do that, right?
Well, aren't they violating the Torah?
And they're violating the Torah law. So that's why Hillel was the president of the Sanhedrin, and the leader of the Jewish people, famous Hillel, we know him, right? So he lived at the end of the first century of the Common Era, before the Common Era, and into the first century. He lived very, very, very long time. He was over 100 years old when he died. He developed, so he didn't invent, but he developed a legal loophole where someone can, at the end of the Shemitah year, can, so to speak, give over their loans to the court. Now, the trick here is that the court, individual loans from one person to another person are annulled at the end of the Shemitah year. But loans given to an institution, or loans disbursed by an institution, those are not annulled at the end of the Shemitah year. So what Hillel developed is this document called the cripple, wherein someone would take all the loans that they have outstanding, give them over to the proxy of the court, and now the guy doesn't owe him, he owes the court, and then kind of the transaction works is that, okay, now you owe the court money, and the court is going to give the money to me.
So how is it different from a credit default swap?
Credit default swap.
So the court takes a percentage then?
No, the court doesn't take a percentage. But the reason why Hillel did this, by the way, there's a series of Mishnahs that talk about tikkun olam. That term first appears in Mishnayit sources regarding Hillel. Hillel and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, where they made these developments in Torah to uphold Torah. Right? And the Mishnah makes it very clear. Hillel saw that people were not fulfilling the mitzvah of lending money because the Shemitah cycle was upcoming. So he didn't do it to change that. He didn't change the Torah. This is also an important thing. He didn't change any law of Torah. He just standardized the process of avoiding the annulment of loans. He just standardized that process. But his intention was to uphold the Torah.
Well, I understand. Prevented perpetual dependency by this loophole is what.
Well, or perpetual non-obedience to this mitzvah. And one mitzvah of the Torah is very crucial.
Non-obedience to the mitzvah,
So-
but
Right.
also
Or maybe
he got
he-
the person to also ultimately realize you can't just indefinitely.
Oh, yes, of course.
not pay the money back.
Yeah, but people suffer for that, right?
That's what.
Because like it's not just the entitlement of the borrower, but it's also the losses of the creditor, right? The lender.
It's also losses to the entire economy. Credit is a lubricant of the economy. Can grow the
Yes.
societal economy.
Yes.
It's good for the society without a credit. And if you cannot issue credit, then
Or can grow it so fast.
People think that they don't never have to pay back credit. The system falls too. So you know.
Disclose that to your potential spouse.
Maybe would that be
Yeah,
something which would hamper? I don't know. I don't know what they did today. Like, do people like put their credit score on their marriage profile on?
If
I
it's
just see
really
you have a lot of
bad,
debt.
Just saying it's really bad.
Someone told me yesterday we had a big event yesterday, torch event. We had a young professionals event, a casino night. So I was talking to one of my friends. It was an amazing event. You can actually watch it all on Facebook. Someone put up a video that was like streaming it all to Facebook live. So it's 3 hours in case you're interested in watching it. I don't know why you would, but we had 100, 150 young adults. It was amazing. And I was talking to one of my friends. I hadn't seen him in a while, but he was coming to this event, and he was talking about J date, but he called it J desperation. That's what he called it. Do people put on their J desperation page? They put their credit score. I don't know. That's something.
That's the latest. Yeah,
Only if
that's
you're
the
about to
new
get
thing.
married.
I don't know. Is that common? It's interesting.
It's a
Like,
new thing, I
but that's a
think.
big factor in someone's. You want to buy a house, want to get a car. If you have a bad credit score. Also, I think a good credit score would show certain degree of prudence in your
Stability.
financial life.
Well, if you're in your middle age, not in your 17th, right? But can you give us an example of some more modern times interpretation of classical Jewish business law?
Yeah. So.
Because if they interpreted in 2,000 years ago, how about 100 years?
Yeah. So what about? Now, like I said, if you want to actually do this properly, like there's entire books, like entire bookshelves you can fill with detailed analysis. We're just trying to get a little. Well, I'm not such an expert in this, I assure you, but it's still interesting, right?
Very.
What about competition? What are the laws about unfair competition? What are the laws about predatory competition? A lot of very interesting questions. So I know in America we like the idea of competition. Like the American notion of competition is like, let's have laissez-faire, right? As opposed to in Europe, they're very much more, yes, they're socialist and very, very much more careful about maintaining competition, so to speak, by crippling the big player. That's why all the big companies, big American companies, they all get these antitrust stuff in France and Europe, and the European Union. But even in America, of course, we have anti-competition laws in the form of patents, right? A patent or intellectual property.
We have
That's
antitrust laws here too.
right. But the
Not just
antitrust
random.
laws here are primarily about saving the consumer, that the consumer shouldn't suffer, as opposed to in Europe, it's about trying to help the competition, so to speak, to level the playing field by hampering the more capable competitor. What does the Torah say about this? So this, of course, once again, this is a huge topic, but the main Gemara talks about what happens if someone has a fishing net. A fishing net set up in a certain area to catch all the fish. And then the competitor says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my net and just put it 12 feet in front of yours. Any fish that was supposed to come into yours is not going to come into mine. Are you allowed to do that? So the Gemara says that you would not be allowed to do that. As this is an example, if someone has think of it as a proverbial stream of business, and you're just, you're disintermediating him, but quite literally.
That's interesting, but what's to stop? Why wouldn't the Torah say there's nothing stopping the next guy from putting in front of him and then putting in front of him. That's what competition is.
But is that really competition, or
No,
is
of course
that
it is.
that
There's a lot of fish in the
innovation?
sea.
You're not really you're not innovating in any way. It's not like you're developing anything new. It's not real competition. You know, the only thing that you actually innovated was putting your net in a way that's a few feet in front of your competitor. It's not really. Is that really competition? Or is competition where you're trying to innovate, trying to do better, trying to make cheaper, trying to increase productivity? Is that really
Well, suppose you put another store that's exactly the same,
Oh,
with
okay,
a different
so-
trade name next door. I mean, like if you go to a mall, they have like 15 shoe stores.
So that's a more interesting question, because there you're not actually going right in front just to
You're not
take the
interfering.
fish that they would have automatically have gotten, and you're not innovating in any way.
A lot of mom and pops accuse Walmart of driving them out of business.
And
Now,
accuse,
I
and that's
personally
fact. That's
think
that's happened.
It's not a fact. I don't think it's not, because you can go. You could say Lowe's and Home Depot drive Ace Hall, but if you
Right.
go to Ace All Spa, because they charge more, but they serve you better.
Yeah.
They don't ignore you like they do at Lowe's and Home
Right.
Depot. They stay in business and they thrive. So I think that it's an excuse to, when you're saying that somebody drives somebody, it's just fair competition.
Walmart never has
Read
put
the
any other
Walmart
business out of
effect.
business. The individuals that decide to shop there instead of mom and pop business, put the mom and pop out of business. The Walmart.
But I think Walmart is not doing what this guy with the fish is doing. Walmart's actually innovating. You know, Walmart's having cheaper prices.
How is that innovating? That's just
It's
having
cheaper prices. They're having better distribution and
They
better.
have an awesome logistical
Distribution
It
channels.
goes into an area, it will price its thing under their own cost. In order, let's
Get
say.
rid of competition.
Okay, so let's say press costs $1.67, they'll price it at $1, even though it costs them $1.10.
That's a lost leader.
classic cost cutting.
Yes, but they'll do it across the thing, and then when they've driven out the local
Oh,
pharmacies.
then they raise the price.
Then they come in, and now it's $1.70. And there's a lovely book called The Walmart Effect, which goes into it in detail. And there are a number of towns which have fought against Walmart entering, because they know that when Walmart comes in, it's the end of Main Street. It's the end of
But
the small mom and
conversely, the
pops.
argument against that would be, well, but the consumer benefits because prices are cheaper,
But
and
aren't they
etc.
putting the net
In the
in
long run,
front?
we're all getting that credit.
But is that a net? Because a net is a net, right? A net is all nets are the same, so to speak.
To a Walmart,
Not
another
a-
Walmart.
Yeah, massive, massive.
better net is much bigger than next to
You
the.
think it would be
But not in
next
front.
to, not in front,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's the price decrease?
Well, what about
So-
you have kosher restaurants, like, which are very.
So there's a lot of questions
You have
about
to have
this.
certain space, like you used to have Susie's, which is now the synagogue, and then you had another, Genesis came out, and other places, like Genesis, for instance, is a kosher restaurant, and they're business that and something
Yeah, I
else.
know, we had our party there.
But in any case, can another restaurant come on that same parking lot that is kosher to attract the same
So the Gemara
clientele?
talks about what happens if someone has a mill. Now, not a very
I don't know.
popular business they have today, but someone has a mill that grinds flour, grinds wheat, and it's a business where they contract out their mill to people, to farmers, right? So someone has a mill here. Can the other person open an establishment, another mill on the same street? And of course, the variables. Of course, we don't have so much time, but there are variables like what if someone's at the end of a dead end? So you have a pizza shop, kosher pizza shop, right? And then the neighbor opens a kosher pizza right across the street. There's no way that the community can sustain two pizza shops. So it's essentially it's a zero-sum game, right? There's no way that they could both thrive. So the factors would be, okay, well, you, by opening up your second pizza shop, are in effect, if you're successful, right? If you're not successful, then you should be opening it anyhow. But if you are successful, you're going to eliminate the guy across the street. You're going to eliminate the guy's livelihood. So the factor that you have to take into account, like Gemara talks about this, can I, and even certainly should I, open up a business that the only way for me to succeed if there's another guy who's unemployed now and has no way to feed his family? Is that the kind of business you want to get into? Is that I think there's a moral question.
That's very more.
Yeah, like the community can handle one pizza shop. There already is one pizza shop. It's not the best pizza. You don't like the service. Fine. But by you open a pizza shop, If you fail, you shouldn't open it to begin with. If you succeed, you know that there's someone now he has kids, he has to pay his tuition, he has to pay his mortgage, and he doesn't have any. Right. So that, but
no, but he's the rabbi's saying that if the fellow moving in or the company moving in already knows that only one of the two are going to survive.
How is it
How
different?
do you know that?
Well, by
assume
you can figure out, but what's
That's
the
an
word for
competition type of art. I'm sorry, the Gemara.
Right, so-
I thought we promoted more freedom in our
Well,
law.
that's the thing. These are very broad discussions, and we're just kind of opening the question. We have no answers yet.
Is it
Where
the same?
That they couldn't not to do it?
So the Talmud brings a dispute, and there's a lot of variables, like are you going to eliminate the other guy's livelihood, which is one question. Another question is, where does that person live? Can I come from a neighboring town, not pay taxes in our town, and open up a business? So I have an unfair advantage. It's like the big question they had with Walmart, not with Walmart, with Amazon, where Amazon, they only had distribution centers in places that with regards to sales tax. So they would have distribution centers in places that had no sales tax, and they would have not a single office in Texas, for example. So it's an unfair advantage because if you want to buy in the local store, you're going to pay 8.25, whatever it is, 6.25% in sales tax. You order from Amazon, not only is it a wonderful experience, but also you're saving money. And that's an unfair advantage because they're not, and the state of Texas is losing, even the consumers benefit, state of Texas is losing, and the Texas people that actually have businesses here are losing because they're paying taxes, and by Amazon avoiding the whole tax thing, they benefit unfairly. So that Gemara talks about that. What if I have a business in town, I live in town, I pay taxes in town. Some guy from the neighboring town pays no taxes in town, and he wants to open a business, and he's going to have an advantage, of course, over me by not paying taxes, and it's the same exact business. And by then, he has an unfair advantage. So that's not a classical case of competition. That's a case of an unfair advantage. It's not an even playing field.
Now you're getting into states' rights. If one state has taxes and the other doesn't,
So what actually happened with Amazon is that Amazon agreed to charge taxes across the board, and because not of all the advantages of an online business against a brick and mortar, this was just an unfair one. According to, I would have preferred to not pay taxes.
What about the flip side of that model, entrenched interest? Tesla certainly was forbidden from a whole bunch of states, for instance, New Jersey, of selling them without dealers.
Direct,
Direct, which will save money to the company, the consumer. But entrenched interest is dealer association.
And a lot of money
North
that goes
Carolina,
to
New Jersey, Texas, by the way. They lobbied legislation for prohibited because there is.
But they didn't give as much
laws.
money in political donations as they.
State laws, which basically they protected their patch. How
So-
different from the existing pizza parlor?
I make a different argument on Tesla. Tesla shouldn't have government taking money out of our pockets to buy that with their subsidies. If Tesla wants
Okay,
to.
what about a
but I
new
understand
bank
you're
moving into the state, right? So Bank of
So,
America moving to
yes,
to change.
5 minutes. I want to just quickly wrap up with some examples of this question. The consensus is built that if the competitor is actually going to have better prices, better service, better merchandise, so that's not a case of someone just coming in and putting the net in front of it. Right? That's a case of someone actually innovating, working hard, trying to have better productivity, and earn the money of earn their business. And of course, that would, in most cases, be allowed. Necessary monopolies. We have this as well over here, where there are monopolies in the form of it doesn't make sense to have two different power lines that go to the house. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense to invest in it. So you have to have a monopoly. But if you have a monopoly, then it has to be governed, because otherwise it has to be regulated, because otherwise they can charge whatever they want, because you need your electricity. So that would be a case where a monopoly protection benefits everyone, and would be allowed. What about teaching Torah? So you have a shul in town. This is an interesting question. There's one shul in town, and then the other shul says, "Oh, I want to open up another shul." Can we say, "Listen, but you're going to take away our members, take away our members, take away our membership, take away our membership, and then we can't have all the things that we have"? Can you say, is there any realm?
I certainly think you should be able to.
So this is interesting because we say there has to be competition in Torah. right? If there's a school and someone wants to open up another school, they cannot stop them because we want to have as much vibrancy and competition as Torah. Because you know what? What happens when the neighboring shul opens? Suddenly, the rabbi has to up his game. He's got to work on his speech a little bit more. The facilities are cleaned, more frequently, and everyone benefits for that. I have a whole list of questions here that I thought were very interesting. What about if someone is able to access the customer base of their competitor? Can they use that? If you're somehow able to access the list of clients that your competitor is using, would you be allowed to use that?
This is the proprietary information.
Well, that's how you get it, right? You get it. I'm going to ask you how you got it.
But
They dropped it on WikiLeaks, right? Can you use that, or that without, because that person invested money in that? He didn't give it to you, right? You acquired it nefariously. Let's assume it's not illegal. It's just something that's available online. Can you use that?
You do get that when, let's say, somebody is working for one company, quits, goes to another company, and brings the information with them.
That's illegal.
If you get it legally,
There are some non-disclosures against
They
that.
can sue. They can easily sue.
What about, can you trash your competitors? Right, but it happens all the time. What about in industries where that's the business, right? If you watch any, only television I watch is football, but they always have these. They had this thing where the guy from Sprint, he took a like a weed whacker or something like that, and he took it like a Verizon bill and chopped it in half, and all you see, all the telecommunications, that's their marketing models. That we're cheaper than Verizon. Oh, but Verizon is, right? It's like, this is how many balls T-Mobile has, and this is how many Verizon has. Like that's what their marketing is. So would that change? Typically, the best way to promote your business is not necessarily by trashing your competitor, but rather by upping your game. In a business where that's the marketing, that's what everyone does, and of course that would change. That would change it as well. What about? This is an interesting question. We'll stop with that. This will be the last one. This is more. Of course, we don't have so much time. What about Amazon reviews? Amazon reviews. Are you allowed to post? You're selling a product on Amazon. You make a new Amazon account. Oh, I love this. It's great. It's wonderful. 5 stars.
And somebody else says it sucks. It does this.
And then you go to your competitor and you say, I bought it, and the package was wonderful. Right?
Free speech.
Well, yeah, but it's deception.
It's what?
It's deception.
Well, maybe. A contrary view
in
is
America,
not necessarily deceptive.
But it's not contrary view, right?
It's a
not.
lie.
It's yes. Are you allowed to lie in America? Free speech.
No.
Is that against the Torah? Yes.
But legally, yes. But morally, no. And maybe.
Okay. So is it moral to do that? Where it's a fake review. You're presenting as if you're an unbiased, verified purchaser. You bought it and you like it, and you just want to share that with the world. But really, you just want to promote your own business, and then you go to your competitor and say, 1 star. Oh, terrible, 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 terrible. And now
it's like promoting books. People write in, all their friends send in the thing.
Little blurbs, yeah. So it's an interesting question.
But wait a minute, doesn't Jewish law say you don't defame someone else in order to benefit? Or
what if you're trying to save the populace from using them, right? It's an interesting question.
If you know you're doing it just to promote yourself, you're not trying to save.
This would all fall under the laws of Lashon Hara, I think.
No, okay, but yes, I would agree as well. Yes, yes.
And like our business, we deal with lists and competitors. So really likely our company deals with it. They always say, don't ever badmouth your competitor. You need to say good things about them. We're glad they're doing the same thing we are, and they're just different.
I also think it's not good for business. It's not good for business to trash your competitor.
So I like that they handle it in a very.
What about showrooming? This is a great question. Showrooming. Are you allowed to walk into Best Buy with zero intention of buying anything there? Yeah. It's just you instead of going to Amazon and reading the product reviews, you just want to just use it. So
Dennis Prager had a analogy to that with a car dealer. He said, you cannot go and test drive a car if you have no intention of buying. In other words, you don't.
This is based upon the Gemara. The Gemara says that you cannot.
Do that all the time.
You cannot walk into a store because you're walking into the store. You're giving the owner, the proprietor, the impression. Oh, there's a new customer. Let me show him around, right? And you have zero intention of buying anything. Then you're just taking their resources and they're and making them believe something that's untrue. Either way, lots of interesting questions. We barely scratched the few.
That person, I'm just checking it out. Like a lot of times, women might go to a store, go window shopping, we might look at some shirts. A customer will come. A long lady will come over. May I help you find something? You say to the person, I'm kind of looking on my own. I don't plan to buy today. I might come back in the future.
So that's different.
So
If
tell
you're
the
actually going to
person-
buy in the future potentially, then that of course would be different. Or if the store's full and they don't notice you coming in, and you're not going to take any salespeople away from real potential customers, all those factors would apply.
But you have to be honest. That's the whole thing. You should be honest with
course
the
you have to be
lady
honest.
coming to you.
Suppose you go in and investigate how they're doing business, and you do all the things.
Scouting
Yeah.
the competitor.
A secret shopper.
Checking it out.
How much more would address like lie detectors? Because why are lie detectors admissible in court? I mean,
They're not so necessarily admissible. I don't think they're admissible in court. They're not.
would that be?
They're not admissible.
No. Well, the lie detector the Torah uses is swearing on a Torah scroll.
I mean, but why?
That's what we use. If you,
Being under oath.
that's on the oath, exactly. Okay, guys, lots of fun. I'll see y'all next week.
Likewise.